All right. Welcome to Nordic Magic Link. Today I have the honor of having my friend Saida Désilets with me. And she is a Canadian author, dancer, and a teacher of female empowerment and embodiment and sexuality. Welcome, Saida.
Oh, it's so amazing to be here, Emma. I love it. I always love hanging out with you, and I think we're going to weave some good magic today.
I think so too, and I'm very happy you wanted to talk to me about these things. So just so people can get an understanding of who you are, do you want to tell your story, how you got started on, the
Yeah,
type of work that you do, your spiritual path?
absolutely. Well, the story kind of begins a long, long time ago when I was 5 years old, but we need to tell the story because I think that when we are children, you can tell the genius, that which wants to come forward in life and be expressed at the age kind of like between 5 and 7. So whatever kids are really doing, then pay attention. So then I had an experience where I had a cognitive awareness of my clitoris. And I'd been playing with it since birth, my mom told me, but I hadn't had a cognitive awareness of it. And then I was like, wow, this is so amazing. Everyone needs to know. And so I taught my very first little circle with other 5-year-old girls, and I was giving them instructions like how to locate it and how great it was. And then I got in a lot of trouble and I was thrown out of that house. And I remember kind of like flying off the porch and thinking to myself, I don't think she knows about this spot, because if she did, she wouldn't be that angry. And so the reason I tell that story is because for me, sexuality has always been just like breathing. It's very natural. And the pleasure of the body is very natural. And I've always wanted to share a kind of a shameless, erotically innocent place with sexuality with everyone who desires to listen. And I also understand that we live in a world that most people are terrified of sexuality, and they have a lot of negative experiences around it or ideas about it or just confusion about it. It's definitely a very misunderstood part of our human life. So that began when I was 5, and now we're going to fast forward to how I got on this whole path. In my path, I think the big, you know how we have these big moments where it's like boom, then we start this thing, and for me it was death. So I was told I had 2 weeks to live when I was 20. It's a long time ago, and I had to face my death. I had to face that I'd been in an emergency surgery. I'd been raped quite violently, and then I was dying. Something was really wrong, and I had to be rushed into emergency surgery. And when I came out of that, they're like, "We're sorry, we can't help you. It's too late." But it obviously wasn't, because that was a long time ago. And so I was faced with a crossroads. So the first kind of real big spiritual awakening was to be told this, and then to defy my surgeon and defy all odds and say, I want to live. I don't know how, but I know that I want to. And the how revealed itself step by step by step. And very slowly, it's like a book jumps off a bookshelf, or you meet a certain person, and that weaves your path. And so my path got woven in the direction of conscious sexuality very quickly, which was important because there was a reclamation that had to happen. And, obviously with a lot of journeys, sometimes it's wonderful and sometimes it's very difficult. So I believe that experience happened to me so that I could bridge the deep pleasure that I lived, because I don't think if you're in the state of deep pleasure and you have access to that, you're a little bit of an alien in our society. So through the process of having to face sexual violence and death has allowed like a bridge so other people can see, oh, she's mortal, she's normal. She was able to recover. She's no longer in trauma. If she can do it, I can do it. So it created a bridge, that experience. So I have no ill feelings toward it. And then maybe the last thing I want to say around how this all started was it had never occurred to me, Emma, that I was a victim of rape. Those words never came in my head. It wasn't until many years later when someone told me that that was true, that that's what happened. I knew I'd been raped, but I didn't identify as a victim of rape. Hadn't occurred to me.
There's a big difference there,
Yes,
energetically.
yes. So I had a rape experience. I didn't put any conditions on my healing, including I didn't need apology from the person or for him to go to jail or for like I didn't put any conditions on my healing. I couldn't. I was near death. I didn't have time for resentment and crap. I just had to really do what I had to do to live. And so that was the birth of a very sovereign energy, which is why my work now is all about sexual sovereignty. But it began then, and I was obviously a young woman, and I didn't have any guidance. So there were a lot of mistakes that happened on my path. And that's why I'm such a huge advocate now. I'm like, don't make the same mistakes that I did. I can save you a lot of time. It's much faster and much more integrated if you look at it with this and this and this and this. So I've collected so much information, and I've really believe in embodied leadership. So I don't share anything that I don't personally live. Yeah.
Beautiful. May I ask, why did they say that you were dying? Were you stabbed, or what was the?
No, the violence was, the act was violent, but what had happened was I was raped anally, and then he went into my vagina. There was no protection, and at the time I was suffering from dysentery. So whatever was in the gut and rectum got transferred to the vagina, and then it led to something called PID, pelvic inflammatory disease, and you can die from that. And if you don't die from that, most likely you'll be sterile. So,
Okay.
it's a pretty big thing to happen. But I never really wanted kids, so it was never really a big deal for me because I was like, I've actually never had that desire, so I didn't really worry if that. I don't know if I am or not because I've never actually tested it, but
Yeah.
it seemed interesting that that's what I would have pulled into my own path at that point. Yeah.
Wow. Such a crazy experience.
Very crazy. A
Well,
lot of pain, like so much pain.
I'm glad it led to
Yeah,
something positive, completely
absolutely.
changing
And
your life.
yeah, that's why now I advocate. I'm like, look, your deepest pain is also your point of your greatest power. And it's not through turning away from it that you'll access that power. It's by leaning into it and accepting it and moving through it that we access the power that's hidden in that pain. And I've now helped, I don't know how many, tens of thousands, 100,000, I don't know how many women I've helped because I've been doing this work a long time. And that is one of the statements that's really supported a lot of women's transformation, is just to understand that this thing that is so painful can also be a source of their greatest empowerment. Yeah.
And you grew up in Canada on a farm, right?
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
remember
I grew up.
you were telling me you have native blood. Do you have, because this podcast, we usually look at the influence of our ancestors. And if you feel like you have anything in your life or in your upbringing that was from your ancestors.
Oh, well, what's really interesting is two of my great grandmothers were pure Canadian native from the Innu tribe. It's out east. And there's not a lot of Innu left now, but it was a robust tribe a long time ago. And however, my father was invited to work with Native people in the middle of Canada. So we went from the east to the middle. And so I spoke French first, and then I learned Ojibwe. So my second language was Ojibwe, and I learned English as a third language.
Wow.
And now English is my dominant language. But back then I wanted to play with the kids, so that's what you do. And so I was brought up on one of the most violent First Nation reservations. So I was brought up in that culture, but also a very intense place. And I was adopted by the shamans and literally a ceremony happened where it's a naming ceremony, because they believe if you're not given a proper name, your soul is not protected. So there was an entire ceremony that was done for my sister and I, at one of the huge powwows where you have to dance as they sing your naming song.
Wow.
So that happened, and so then I became part of that culture, and then I was raised as that culture with potlucks, which is a gathering where everyone brings food and you share the abundance. Sweat lodges, getting sweetgrass and sage, and like just in the traditional way with the prayers and the offerings and all of that. So my religion, if there was one, was nature and earth and the creator and the animals. And I spent a lot of time alone in the woods and had very profound experiences like this. So what I find intriguing about that is that there's this ancestral line that I didn't get to grow up in, but then I ended up still in that culture as the white kid, right? In that culture, and absorbed a lot of it. And then now that I'm here in Greece, because this feels like home to me, this particular area, and I just found out in the last year through a DNA test that I have, but 1,000 years ago, a long time ago, Greek ancestry. So I think the ancestors are very loud, you know, they're very loud and very present, very, very present.
Yeah, I think so too. They follow us and they always try to get us to listen. And the way you're describing your religion is actually how we describe shamanism. As you probably know, shamanism has been practiced in all cultures all over the world at some point. So I think that's why, to me, it attracts me so deeply. I just feel so connected with that spirituality, because it is nature.
Yes.
You are looking at what's nature doing and then following that, and then you're connecting with through journeys, you're connecting with your ancestors and asking them for guidance and healing. And what was if you can, I don't know if you're allowed to share the name that you were given.
Yeah, I will share it with you off camera, but not
Okay,
here.
but it's sacred.
It's a sacred name,
Yeah.
but it can tell you what it means. It means the leader.
Okay.
And
Wow.
so, and I hated it. I didn't want to
Why?
be a leader because I didn't like the leaders. I thought all the leaders were assholes. And I
Oh.
was like, I don't want to be one of those people. And
Mm.
I hated it until the day I realized one can lead through example. And then I chose to make my life an embodiment of the things that I regarded as high virtue and things that were important. And then just to lead through example, meaning embodied leadership, where I'm not telling people what to do, I'm just living, and through that limbic resonance, they're absorbing my truth and my wisdom.
Mm.
So,
And did they often have ceremonies there?
oh yes. And as I got older, then I became part of another lineage, another shamanic lineage of Taoism. So
Hmm.
the Asian lineage of shamanistic understanding, deep, thousands of years old. And I got very strong because I started doing deep qigong practice, and my energy body, everything got very strong. And so when I went back to the reservation, the shamans would invite me into their healing ceremonies, and I was like a battery to them. They would just siphon off this energy and heal everybody with it, but then I would be like half dead. So I said, guys, time
Wow.
out. You need to do your own work. You can't use me as a battery because it's not right. But I was very young and I didn't understand how energy also can be misused or just misdirected. Now I have obviously a much better understanding of that. But these are the lessons that we learn as we move through life. And so,
So
just,
instead of getting the energy from the source, they were getting it from you?
yeah. And it
Oh.
wiped me out. It
Yeah.
absolutely wiped me out.
Yeah, that's not
So,
good.
no, not good. But I mean, a lot of these traditions have lost their potent teachings.
Mm.
And at least in Canada, a lot of the First Nations suffer from, there's an epidemic of diabetes, there's an epidemic of gender-based violence, there's an epidemic of alcohol and drug abuse, and you name it, it's happening. And so for these people to reclaim themselves is a massive journey, and some are, but there's been a lot lost with the stuff that's happened, to that culture. Thankfully, it's reviving. I can see like a revival coming, even in Hawaii. So when I'm there, I train with a kahuna. So it's the Hawaiian shamanistic path, and that's also very powerful. So as you can tell, I love all these mystical, earth-based wisdom, because they feel honest and simple. Like, it's obvious. In Hawaii, there's a practice where you must make right all the wrongs, and they say something's not pono when you're lying or you're cheating someone or you're doing something is off. It's not pono, and you have to then make it right. And there's a whole ceremony for making it right. So I love that kind of stuff, and I feel like this needs to be brought back into the mainstream so that people have tools to deal with the dissonance of modern living. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I'm just going to shift a bit so that I have a bit more light, because here the sun is setting, so we want to
Yeah,
get
you're in Greece
light.
now.
Yes, I'm in Greece. There we
That's
go.
wonderful. And because you're in Hawaii quite often, you do workshops there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes, they're intermarriage workshops, very deep practice for, I just work with women in this particular area, for marrying yourself. And I combine that with the Hawaiian kahuna. We go into a cave, we do this remarkable ceremony. You won't believe this. So imagine a lava tube. So it's formed by lava. There's no controlling lava, right? So it's a big black lava tube. But in the ceiling is glowing silver and gold flecks. So you feel like you're in outer space as you walk through this black, you can't see anything. You need a flashlight.
wow.
Black lava tube. And then you get to this place where on the floor, bigger than me, is a perfect anatomical vulva in red lava. Only the vulva is in red lava. It has a clitoris, a clitoral hood. It's got the inner and outer lips. It's got the vaginal open. It's got the whole thing.
Wow.
And it's been used for thousands of years for sacred ceremony for the feminine and feminine healing and feminine mysteries. And very recently, they've decided to open it up to men because they felt like men needed to absorb some of the feminine wisdom in order to make things more balanced. So it's a very powerful cave.
Wow. So you do these marriages with women there?
Yes, not in the cave, but the cave is
Okay.
part of the initiatory experience. But the cave is led by the shaman, the local kahuna, who does all the ceremonies in there and just activates all the women. And then that night we do a marriage ceremony with ourselves under the full moon. It's always planned that way. So
Wow.
yeah.
How long is the workshop you have there typically?
It's 1 week once we're there, but it's a 6 month preparation.
Wow.
So we meet once a month. Is it once or twice a month on a call? I think it's once a month on a call, and people are given things to think about and dream into. And there's a lot that I don't say. I just hint, and I let people dream into what's arising. And then when they arrive in Hawaii, all the stuff they've dreamed into then falls into place with information that makes sense. Yeah.
Wow. And what else do you do in that week when you're there?
Lots of qigong practice. So we do a lot of practice outdoors. I always say 1 hour of practice on the big island of Hawaii is equivalent to a month anywhere else in the world. Because the land is constantly making itself, so it's very, very alive. And we spend time in nature. There's a nude beach that I like taking everyone to. Just like be your free self, swim, rest, roll in the black sand. The black sand is magnetic. It's incredibly healing. If you're just lying on there, it feels like you're on living like something that's alive. Yeah, Yeah, and lots of meditation, dance, self-inquiry. It's quite a deep process. And then, as you know, I also do stuff in Africa. So
Yeah, tell me about the workshops in Africa.
yeah, well, those are my absolute favorite. And those are 2 weeks, and there's a 3-month preparation. And basically, the idea behind that is to activate your pre-lingual authority, your pre-lingual knowing, and bring that all back online, because we use that for far longer than we use linguistic knowing. And so what happens, what I mean by that is the instinct and the intuition is fully comes alive. And then your telepathic or your interspecies ability to communicate with plants and animals comes online. And I do that first by detoxing Western living, by going to live in a Kosa village and meeting the matriarch and the Sangoma, which is the local shaman, medicine woman. And we do ceremony with her, and we also speak with the matriarch. So we detox like the Western lifestyle by living in these little round huts and eating what they eat, and then hiking all day in nature and going to the next village and just absorbing, that culture. So by the time I bring women to the wilderness, they've calmed down. And then it's 6 full days in the wilderness. And it's in the Big Five territory. So that means there's full-on predators. There's no jeeps, there's no lodges, there's no tents. We sleep under the open sky on baboon ledges. And there's one person that stays awake every night on night watch while they hear the lions and the hyenas and whatever else you're hearing. And everyone else is sleeping, and one person keeps the fire going and just makes sure that there's no predators coming into the camp.
What do you do if there is a predator coming?
Then you wake the guards. We have guides,
Okay.
and they have weapons, but
Okay.
they've never had to use them because they
Okay.
understand animal behavior.
Yeah.
And there's something magical that happens when you're out there. I learned through, I think, one of the best animal communicators in the world, Anna Breitenbach, and just to this basic knowledge. I mean, nowhere near her skill set, but just the basic knowledge. And there's something about, we do ceremony before we come in the Zulu way. So we do like a Zulu ceremony before going in, where we acknowledge that we're entering their worlds and we'd like to be part of their family. And then we live as one. So there's 10 of us, 2 guides, myself, and 7 women. And we live as one, and there's hardly any talking. So you communicate through clicking. And then I insist that there's 2.5 days of silence partway through. And that's when the magic happens. When the mind silence is enough. When you let go, you have to let go of everything, because you have nothing out there. You literally have nothing, just yourself and life. And you see life and death all the time because it's raw and primal. And when we get quiet enough, then the animals come very close. So we have the elephants come, and the buffalo come, and the giraffes and the zebras. And last year we came within 20 meters of 2 massive male lions. They were the size of horses. I'd never seen anything that majestic in my life. And I felt like I'd seen God. I could not stop sobbing for hours. Absolutely hours. And they could have killed us in an instant, and they didn't.
Wow.
And to me, that's very special. And so what happens then, because these are such intense things to put people through, I've brought people out there that have severe PTSD, and it just goes away because something else comes online, not the neurotic, modern human, but the capable, deeply connected human comes back online. And yeah, there's just nothing like it. It's absolutely life-changing and breathtaking.
That sounds absolutely amazing. Wow. And what do you bring food out there, or do you
Yes,
do you
we
hunt?
have
Okay.
packs. We have packs, and everything's, and it's a leave no trace. You literally cannot even leave a little thread. So yeah, we make our own water. The riverbeds are pretty dry, so you have to dig holes, and then the water filters through the sand. It's really clean, but you could just drink it like that, but they put drops so that we can, you know, just make sure. And we also boil the water. So, but it's amazing just to get back to really, like, one of my favorite things is to wash the pots because we use elephant dung as our scrubbers.
Wow.
Because elephant dung is just digested tree bark.
Okay.
It's just, imagine like holding chewed up digested tree bark, and it's very scrape and it gets rid of everything. And so it's really remarkable. Someone's like, I'm washing my dishes with elephant poop. That's just weird. But there's some, like I said, what happens is other things come online and you feel very free, and then you come back into the world a changed person, and you will never lose that.
Mm.
And this is why it's so important to me. And it's that primal instinctual instinct. We're so domesticated. We have really forgotten who and what we are. And if I can support people to remember even just a fraction of that, then I will do it. I will do everything I can to support that.
And do you still do these workshops?
Yes, except with COVID this year, I wasn't able to. But it's a form of ecotourism. If you can imagine, these people have no money, and we're very conscious and very respectful. But every time we come, it's a lot of money to those villages.
Yeah.
And then they can fight away the mining companies that are trying to destroy their land. And they've been, trying to keep these people away for 15 something years.
Right.
So I feel really good. And then when you go out in the wilderness trails, you also eliminate poaching, because the more people are on the trails, the less the poachers go out. So that's a form of protecting the endangered species as well. So I feel really happy to be supporting that economy and that system.
Yeah. Wow. So do you think it'll happen again when
Yes,
this crisis is over?
yes, absolutely. I mean, I have to go. It's one of my homes, and
Yeah.
So
you're doing Hawaii and Africa. Have you
South
done?
Africa, Hawaii, Greece. These are like my three main
Okay.
points of contact. Yeah.
So have you also done workshops in Greece,
Yep,
or planning
I
to?
have.
Yeah. Okay.
Last year I did one in a cave. It was like a half cave. So we had shade for the day, and we had the earthing energy, and we did all the practices in the cave. It was amazing.
Wow.
But this year, no, I don't want to be around people. I just want to respect, what's going on. Everyone has a different perspective. So I'm just here on an inquiry, actually.
Okay.
I'm in the inquiry of the original current of Eros, because I think we have such a horrible relationship with Eros, erotic aliveness. Let's call it aliveness. Everything that you see that has life has Eros within it. That's the Grecian concept of it. And they use Eros very differently than we do. They don't just mean sex. I mean, if they listen to good music, they're like, I'm so filled with Eros with this song. So I'm in the inquiry of it because I feel that part of my role right now is to help people come back to a very natural place around their body, their pleasure, their sexuality, and to heal those parts of their life so that they can enjoy. And I actually feel it's more crucial now than ever that people have a pleasure-based practice, because every system in the body becomes more optimally functional when we are in a pleasure, when there's pleasure happening. For constant stress, everything starts to shut down. So it's actually really important technology right now is to get back to pleasure and understand it very deeply. So I'm looking at it from a science perspective with a lot of research, but I'm also looking at it from nature and just being, just swimming and feeling the bliss of like swimming and just wow. And what is that? And how do you translate that? So.
Wow. Yeah, your book Desire came out when you were living here in Topanga, and I read it, and it was really, really inspiring. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about that book and the overall
Yeah,
message?
I'd love to. Well, obviously the title, Desire, there's no
Yeah.
subtitle, no subtitle needed.
Yeah.
However, you probably realize as you were reading through it that it's not the typical understanding of desire. So I actually position desire as a force of nature and evolutionary, so it's always evolving, and it's emergent, meaning it's the thing that is propelling everything forward. And so I wanted to position it that way because we have such a horrible relationship with it. We blame it for all our suffering. We love it and we hate it, and there's all these misbehaviors. And so the book then breaks down what is desire, how does it show up. So I have 6 kind of specific, I call them desire songs, or like a way in which desire shows up. So we have Eros, like we just mentioned, sexuality. We have love, just desire to be in love and have a beloved and all that. Beauty, procreation, to bring life into the world and create a family. Strong desire for a lot of people. Thriving, especially right now with what's going on. This thing that actually keeps us going even when things are very difficult, this desire to thrive. Rapture, to know the divine in whatever form that you choose to name it. That this ache, this yearning to know it is rapture. And then contribution. I don't know a single human who's not impacted by the desire to contribute something, or the feeling of loss and worthlessness when that goes away. So then those are kind of original impulses they motivate us. We get a yearning in our heart for something. We're like, oh, I just want to help this, or I just would love to experience that. This is important. It's like the message of your own essence. It's speaking to you through your body. It's like a compass. It's an amazing compass. The problem, though, and I discuss this in the book, is hijacked desires. So what hijacked desires are is preconditioned ideals and mandates that form themselves around these original desires. So what kind of partner should you be in love with? To very specific things, and it's very cultural. If you go to different cultures, it's all very mandated. Even things around children or religion or anything, they're very mandated. So those are hijacking those original impulses. And so part of the book is to help a person identify, okay, this is natural to feel this. However, how it's expressed itself in my life is not fulfilling. It feels empty. And yet I can still see that there is underneath that, all that, there's still the desire. And can I just go there to that original place and experience fulfillment? And so it's a small book. It's like a little pocket book. But I think it's packed with some pretty interesting and big ideas.
It is, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it opens with a very shamanic experience. Which I wanted to do. I share a very powerful initiatory experience that I had on a vision quest, because you read it and you're like, that can't be true. It can't be real whatsoever. And yet it's completely true. And I wanted to share that story because if I'm going to be the voice of desire to support people to bridge that gap, I have to let people know that I'm not normal. Like there's something very bizarre going on with this human being.
I love that.
Right? And that's okay. Because for some of us, our uniqueness is the thing that actually helps us bring a healing or a gift to others, even though it might be weird and difficult to live with initially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to share that experience that you opened the book with, or?
Yeah, if you'd like me to.
Yeah.
That. Okay. So this was a test for, we were going to go on a month-long vision quest, and this was a 4-day vision quest mini test to see how the group would do. And it was out near Salt Spring Island. There's another little island that we went to that people don't live on, but it's where there's a lot of eagles and you can camp there. So we went and we spent a day like blindfolded and chasing the shaman. You had to just stay with him because if you lose the sound of his footsteps, you get lost, and that's the end. So you're just running, and he's running full speed with his eyes open, and you're blindfolded, and you're just running. And then there's this moment where I hear nothing, and then I hear. So he's jumped off this cliff. I'm like, oh shit. And I jump and there's nothing. And then I land and I was like, oh my God, that was amazing. So my feet learned to become my eyes, which was incredible. But that night is where something very interesting happened, where I was asked to lead how to ground everybody because people were a little bit expanded from the running experience. So I was doing a grounding practice and I'm sitting there and I can feel kind of a quick heartbeat in my perineum. That's the area, right, where if you sit down on the ground, it's the lowest part of your torso that's touching the ground between the anus and the genitals.
The root chakra.
Yeah, I'm like, is that my heartbeat? So I take my pulse and it's a different rhythm. My pulse is like boom, 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 boom. And this one's, so it's not the same at all. I'm like, whoa, that's kind of weird. And I keep teaching. And then the shaman leaps up. He's like, stop, stop, stop. Something huge is happening. Everybody up, everybody up. What is it? Who is it? Speak up, please. Tell us something. And I'm like, yes, speak up. What is it? Because I feel there's something. And then this huge wind comes and just blows through everyone. I'm like, whoa. And then this eagle comes and starts screaming. And it's just circling over us and screaming and screaming and screaming. I'm like, wow. And no one's saying anything. I'm like, whoa. Someone say something because there's something happening. And in that moment, through the soles of my feet comes this current. I can only explain it like a current, like an electrical current. And if you can imagine, your best human orgasm is like 100 volts of power, of energy. This was 1,000. And it arced my body and I let out a scream because it was pleasurable and painful. Because it was so much, like more than I'd ever felt in my nervous system before. And then I came back and I took a deep breath. I'm like, whoa, what the hell was that? But before I could think, a second volt went through for 10,000 volts of power. And I arced even further back and I screamed even more and it was even more intense. And I couldn't think anymore and I just stood back up and I was heavily breathing, just trying to process what had happened. And then it hit a third time and it was 100,000 volts. And that last one had me arcing all the way back till my head was almost touching the ground. And I'm not a yogi, so I don't do back bends and stuff like that. And when I came up from that one, the shaman was in my face and he said, stop, you're scaring everyone, instead of leading it properly. So it was a huge shock because this power was coming through me. I think if it had been facilitated properly, something else would have happened that could have been magnificent, but it wasn't. And very quickly, everyone in the camp started to have sex. And I couldn't deal with it because I'd just experienced something so pure, something so massive, that human sex felt like this feeble attempt of replicating. And it was almost disgusting to me. I had to run away, and I ran away. I spent the night in the woods sobbing, curled up in a little fetal position. And in the morning when I woke up, I was walking back and about 10 or so hummingbirds came and they just surrounded me and flew around me all the way back to camp. And it was just so magnificent because they're so beautiful and it made me feel safe again and okay. And that experience has never been explained. But I've met so many shamans and healers and powerful this and that, and no one understands it. So I know it's mine to decipher.
What do you think it was?
Well, for me, that's why I'm here in the inquiry of, I'm calling it the Dionysian current, which is pure life force energy. And so I'm more mature. I've way more practice. My nervous system is very robust. I'm able to ground. My mind is sound. There's a lot. I'm pretty even. I'm living a good life, and so I think now I can inquire back into what happened and allow that to come back and express itself, so that I can understand it and then perhaps use it to help others. So it's an unusual experience to have. But in sharing that, I've had 2 people write to me say they had the same experience. So that's also really fascinating to me. So perhaps by putting it out there, others who've had that similar initiation will come forward, and maybe part of the pieces of the puzzle will also come forward.
Did they write what triggered their experience?
They didn't tell me exactly what it was. They just said, thank you so much. I had
Okay.
almost an identical experience,
Okay.
and just, and they just felt a little more normal, but they didn't share. They didn't
Okay.
share the experience. And,
Why do
yeah.
you think the rest of the group started having sex?
Because I think what was coming through was pure, if you talk about aliveness or life force or
Life
the
force
pure
energy.
Eros, life force
Yeah.
energy, just coming through me, and everything was electrified in the field, everything. And there was no comprehension, and no one was trained enough to move that energy through their system in a way where they could meditate or use it for something. So the only way they could translate it was the thought of sex, because that's the easiest way. And not that that's a bad thing, but they weren't in control of what was going on.
Mm.
It's kind of like taking mushrooms. You're not that in control of what's going on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you've never done any plant medicine because these things have happened to you without the need
Yeah,
for
those,
drugs.
I was totally sober,
Yeah.
completely sober. All my initiations, big ones, happened sober. And I think that they happened that way so that I could not blame any substance for the experience, but understand that there's something else happening. And I have done some plant medicine. I
Okay.
went to the sequoia in the Amazon. They're like the special forces of the ayahuasca lineages. I didn't know that at the time.
How
and
so?
and they recognized me as one of their own. It was very interesting. I knew every song. I knew exactly what they were doing in their healing ceremonies without knowing, because their language is almost an alien language. It's very interesting.
Wow.
How so? You're not allowed to touch the earth, so you take the medicine and you lay in a hammock, and you're meant to be still and just lay in the hammock. And from what I understand, it's not gentle. Like it's special forces style. It's really hardcore, full on. Like some ayahuasca journeys, everyone's singing happy songs, doing their little thing, and sometimes they're vomiting, but it's very light. It's not like that.
Okay.
It is not, and I didn't know that till later when I met someone who was from South America, and they're like, "Oh yeah, the Sequoia shit. They're like the special forces. Like you don't go to them unless you." I was like, "Oh well, I started there." Okay, but I won't ever do that again. The Yahe lives inside me. Yahe is their name for ayahuasca, and I can feel that plant medicine. It will always be in my system. So it's very interesting, the information that I have with that. And I just feel like all of us have access to these deeper experiences just through our breath. Put your feet on the earth and breathe. It's there. Or maybe in the beginning you don't feel anything, but at some point it can be quite remarkable what comes through when we reconnect deeply, deeply with nature and our own bodies.
I
Yeah.
agree. It's interesting what you said that it's living in you because I interviewed Carrie Hummingbird, who's also an author, a couple weeks ago, and she said the same thing. The plant medicines that she has ingested are now living in her, and when she does her shamanic healing work, she can access that plant and use it on the client that she's working on. And one of the things she talked about was the tobacco plant that she has ingested in a ceremony, and she said it has like a masculine energy, and so it's different from ayahuasca, which is more feminine.
Deep, deep. Yeah.
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 Wow. That's so interesting. All right, I'm gonna see what else I wanted to ask you about. Oh yeah. Well, let's do this first. A natural life or lifestyle. What is that in your opinion?
Well, definitely not computers and cell phones and social media and
Yeah.
politics and virtue signaling and, striving for millions of dollars and all of that. That's fine. That's fine, but that's more what I would call like a modern or, exponential lifestyle. Natural lifestyle to me is it's living very simply. It's good air, good water, whole food, a lot of time unplugged, a lot of time listening to silence, being in nature. To me, nature is my primary teacher now, because I'm not meeting anyone who has greater knowledge than me in my area of knowing at this point. Those teachers haven't shown up. So nature has been my deepest guide and teacher, and so that to me would be part of that natural lifestyle. And then the other part of natural lifestyle is this deep love, and actually like a love affair with your own body, with your own sensuality, because we make sense of reality through our sensuality. It's so important. And that feels very natural to me. It's the things we smell and feel and taste and see that give us so much information. And usually what's more healing and more activating is the things that are natural versus seeing cement walls or hearing screeching horns or smelling exhaust. You're hearing the brook and the fresh air and the sea, and these things live in us. We were in nature much longer than we've ever been civilized. So, yeah.
True. And you find humans have tamed themselves.
Yeah.
And how do we get out of it? Returning to nature and listening to what the body likes.
Yeah, so there's a few things there. I mean, there's some parts of being civilized, if you want to call it that, that are, I think, good, meaning using the prefrontal cortex, because that's the creative, newer part of our brain that's creative. So it's not just, I want this meat, I'm going to steal it from you because I want it. So there's an aspect where we can think a little bit more creatively and in more connected ways that I would not want to get rid of. However, when we don't trust our bodies, when we don't trust our deep yearning and desire, when we are not listening to the whispers in the wind or, our intuition, then we are denatured a little bit, like we're taken away from trusting our own selves. That's a very difficult place to live from. So yes, absolutely. The only medicine I know of is go in your backyard, contemplate a plant, look at the blades of grass, stare up at the sky, look at the stars. If I'm in places where there's very little nature, I will put like nature sounds to sleep to in my hotel room, for example, and it just helps my body down regulate that much more. And learning how we are built as beings. We're either in that pleasure, expansion, relaxation, digestion, having sex place, or we're in hyper arousal, alert, aware, intense kind of place. And it's the modulation between those systems that are important, because sometimes we need to be aroused, we need to act, we need to, do things. And we also need to downregulate and just enjoy being, receiving, breathing for the sake of breathing. And our ability to modulate between those two systems is what makes us healthy, and what brings us back to being more natural, I think.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You recently had a video up on, or you went live on your Facebook, and you were talking about truth.
Yes.
Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Well, why don't you tell me what you liked about it, and then we can talk about it, because I know you contacted me after that.
Yeah, you were talking about how there are many truths, and for people not to be open to other truths than what they're currently focused on.
Yeah. Well, I'm a lover of philosophy, so philosophy basically means the love of wisdom, the philo of Sophia. And there are layers of truth all of the time. And if we're not in the inquiry of, is this true? And how do I know it's true? And why is it true? And could there be something else? If we're not in that inquiry and we just take the first thing that comes to us as the truth, we're really limiting deeper contact. We're actually harming each other, because if I believe that it's true that redheads are naughty, and then I see you, I'm like, my God, she's super naughty. Meanwhile, you're like, I'm not naughty. No, I'm just joking. But just being able to ask yourself those questions and start to discern for yourself, is what I'm hearing really true? And how do I know it's true? And where does it come from? Part of this was developed through obviously all my different trainings, but also from getting a PhD, because when you do research, there's a lot of BS research out there, tons. And some of it's quoted by media and it harms people and it's just false research. So having the ability to discern and to properly ask questions. So then I went further with that and I said, okay, so if you believe in A, the way to know if A is really honest and truthful is then to take a stance against it and argue why A is a lie, first of all, and be willing to do that. And then you can come back if you argue that and you realize actually A is pretty accurate. I like A. Being able to provide that for ourselves, if we can't do that, if we're only ever going to take one side of the story, we're not getting the whole picture. That's for sure. And then if truth is only of the mind, meaning, beliefs, constructs, mandates, ideals, and it doesn't include your conscience, your deep heart, because we all know when we're about to make a bad choice and a good choice. So that kind of visceral truth, the inner knowing, do I go left or right? And your heart's screaming left, and you go right, because right is where everyone else is going. Then that also puts us out of integrity. So I think the word truth can be very charged, but it also can be an adventure. And we can choose to be lighthearted about it, and we can choose to understand that we never will have the whole picture. We can't. It's impossible. This universe is way too complex to see it all. And to be satisfied with sometimes things will be in conflict, and maybe the conflict's there for a reason so that things can change and evolve into something completely different. So what are we aligned to? And then sometimes we really are wrong. We just don't have enough information. And in those times, Emma, what I'm noticing in social media is, say, a certain theme will come out. And the next day, everybody is an expert on that theme, when the day before they had no idea about it, never thought about it. And this just keeps happening. I'm like, how are you an expert on that thing when your thing is over here? So for me, the other truth is to know when to just listen and to observe and to ask questions, because it's not, my area of knowing. And how could I know? I can have an opinion. I can have like a feeling about it. But sometimes we can have feelings about things that are based on past wounds and they're not accurate. And so when we get more information, we can actually change a perspective, and suddenly truth then becomes even deeper. So I don't know if that answers your question or if that's the direction you wanted to go with it, but I think it's invaluable for all of us to be in the consistent inquiry of, what's the deeper truth here? What's underneath this? Is there something underneath? Is there more to this that I don't know?
Yeah, those are really good points. And especially the thing you were saying about, how science sometimes works, because we don't often think about how is that science funded. Often the science, science says this, And then you don't hear that actually Coca-Cola funded that study saying that sugar is fine and fat is the issue, things like that. And that happens in all industries. And when we have, a media that's very really controlled, only owned by 6 huge companies, it's pretty obvious that money does influence. And so that's why it's so important for people to, I feel, to seek out their own, seek out information and look at, if we're talking about studies, look at all studies, look at the independent studies as well, and then seek out
Exactly.
different scientists and hear all their opinions. And that's what we don't get to hear today, I feel, in the media.
Yeah.
Just hold on one second. My cat wants to come in.
No worries. See if I can turn a light on here. I was going to see if I can turn the light on.
Yeah, it got really dark.
I know, because the sun has set now.
And
yes,
then another point I wanted to say is that, how you're saying you can listen to yourself and see, does this feel right?
Yeah.
But sometimes, I mean, that you can definitely do that when it's a personal thing, like joining this band. Oh, do you want to join this band, Emma? And I say, yeah, sure, but actually I'm feeling no. That's very clear to me. But um, things like scientific studies, you don't always have that gut feeling about things because it's so far away from you.
Yeah.
So it can be hard to dissect.
Exactly. And that's why we have to be inquisitive and ask questions. We don't ask enough questions. We make a lot of assumptions. Assumptions are just not going to get us anywhere. So even in relationship, like if you want to have a better relationship, stop assuming. Get curious. I think the biggest thing that humanity needs right now is more curiosity. Lean in, even where it's difficult. Lean in and ask questions with the intent to hear the answer, not just ask it because you're, whatever. Yeah.
For sure. Very
Yeah.
good point.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me see if there's anything else I wanted to ask you about. If you still have a few minutes.
I do.
All right. I think, yeah, the only other thing that I wanted to ask you was that you talked about this experience you told me about, that you were in a dark room for, I think,
Mm.
2 or 3 weeks, was it? 3 weeks. Okay. Um, I don't know what that type of therapy is called, or can you talk about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, you can look up some shamanic lineages where when they determine the child is going to be a shaman, then that child is put into darkness sometimes up to the first 14 years of its life.
Right.
And you develop amazing other senses when you live that
Of
way.
course. Yeah.
And when you emerge, you see the world very differently than a regular person. So this is a Taoist, also a Taoist tradition. So I went to a retreat center, and it was 3 full weeks of complete darkness. There's zero light. In fact, it was so dark that I had to wear a blindfold over my eyes because my eyes were bulging out of my head trying to see, and it was hurting. It was causing strain. So by putting a blindfold on, I stopped them from trying to see. And then so the first week was very interesting because if you're not used to being in the dark, you just sleep all the time. Your body's
Yeah.
like, it's dark, we sleep. So
Yeah.
you sleep a lot and you're exhausted. With this modern lifestyle, everybody's exhausted. So I was exhausted. So you sleep a lot. The second week, it felt like every injury and pain I'd ever experienced came back. I mean, it was excruciating. It was like something, like a form of detox. in the body. And there was actually a moment I literally thought I was going to die. I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm dying. Like, and I'm going to die here in the freaking dark and no one's going to know, you know? I said, well, if I'm going to die, I might as well do it consciously and just calm down. It's like I was talking myself through this thing. Obviously I didn't die, but the pain was so bad I thought I was going to. By the third week, the body would sleep for 3 hours, but I was awake 24/7.
Wow.
And I had clairsentience, clairaudience, clairvoyance, all of that came online. Wasn't on anything, but had full, like, visual things going on. I could see in the dark. Even though I was blindfolded, I knew where everybody was, and I could move around easily. It was very interesting. I started getting a lot of information. Later confirmed very accurate, but I'd never studied those things. So that was interesting. And then when I came out, what was even more interesting was I could not stop laughing because all the adults had these huge Humpty Dumpty heads. Children had normal size heads, but adults had these massive heads. And I couldn't understand what was happening. And they looked so stupid and silly to me. I was just laughed for a whole week.
Why did they look like that to you?
I don't know. I mean, it was the visual that I was getting when I would look at people. But what was really great when I came out was we come out on a new moon, the darkest night. Aww. And the light from the stars is like rainbows coming down, just spiraling. And it was too bright. The light from the stars hurt my eye.
Wow.
Yeah. And the next day and for many days, I could see rainbows coming off everything, even a cigarette butt. Didn't matter what it was. There was light streaming, and I could feel my own skin eating light. Very interesting stuff going on. I would definitely do it again. In fact, if I ever build my own house, I will build a way to have a dark room that I can spend, 3-4 days in a month or something. Yeah. It's really nourishing and very insightful.
And it's just called what's it called?
The Darkness Retreat.
The Darkness Retreat. Okay.
But
and how do they feed you?
They feed you. You get a lot,
Okay.
way too much food. Yeah,
Oh.
and then they send in blind masseuses and people with infrared to clean and keep things tidy.
Okay.
It's very, very well organized. Yeah, and I think, I don't know, it was a remarkable experience and life-changing, and I wouldn't recommend to go as a couple. I would recommend going alone, just being alone with yourself and deepening deeply into yourself. It's usually a 1-month preparation before because you have to up your levels of tryptophan and some other things to help your melatonin levels. And then once you're in the dark that long and you don't have the serotonin kicking in, the melatonin keeps building and building and building. It's extremely high levels. And that's when then there's a cascade, they call it the spiritual hormones, start to be produced. And that's when you get the clairaudience, clairsentience. And everyone has this. Every human being has it. It's just dormant because we do light. We have dark and then we have light. And we barely have dark now because we have lights on all the time and we're looking at screens all the time. So we're not getting enough darkness.
Yeah. We're blue light toxic, as Dr. Jack Kruse says.
Yes. Yep. I agree.
Oh, wonderful. That is such an interesting experience.
Now I look like the scary being,
No. You look beautiful, but it's interesting how you were talking about darkness retreat, and now you are in the darkness.
Yeah, I love the dark. So I'm really honored to be here, and I hope that something in this conversation serves your community. And I just want to invite everybody to fall in love with themselves and their body and in life, have like a secret love affair with life. I mean, it's truly a magnificent way to orient. Even now, with all the difficulties, if we can choose to have that natural joy bubble up and choose to do pleasure-based choices, whether it's just a self-massage or resting more or whatever it might be, to help and support our immune systems and our mental health and our hormonal systems. Yeah, super important.
I love that, and that goes very well in hand with my cat Nina purring here next to the
Yes,
microphone. If you can hear that.
I can totally hear her.
um, Saida, where can people find more about you?
Yeah, well, let's send them to the book, desirethebook.com.
Okay.
And there's a free book club with 12 videos, like so much content, free, all free.
Cool.
Some downloadable meditations, a playbook that you can use while you read the book to really personalize the experience. And that one's desirethebook.club. So desirethebook.com and desirethebook.club. And I think those will be great resources for
Wonderful.
our explorers here.
Yeah. And I'll also link to your Instagram and YouTube and Facebook if you want, and your
Yeah.
website.
And you can check the TEDx talk because that was all about desire. And
Yeah, you did a TEDx talk. That's right. I remember seeing that, and I shared it on Facebook.
awesome.
Yeah, wonderful talk. Well, thank you so much, Saida. I really appreciate you coming on the Nordic Magic Link podcast.
Yes, it's such a pleasure to be here and be with you and enjoy your cat and enjoy your audience. And yeah,
Yes.
it's an honor and a privilege, really. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's my honor to have you.
Yay.
Take care.
Take care.